this particular session, they asked me to talk about what's new in software-defined access. And so much has happened since I last talked to you guys in Las Vegas that I was like, okay, I'm forced to do a recap. So many things have changed, but I'll be brief. So, that's normally the number one question. What the heck is SD access? So all these slides you have seen previously, I'm just recapping. And what I said in the last session was really the subtitle of this slide is the whole punchline, right? We've had Campus Fabric for a long time, and if you were to go and do it on your own with CLI, set up all the protocols, set up all the policy, you would have Campus Fabric, right? But if you integrate that with DNA Center, and you add all the elements of automation and assurance, and I know you guys have other sessions on automation and assurance, I'm not going to try and get into that too much, but that extra bit is what makes SD Access. So building the Campus Fabric, assuring the Campus Fabric, that's SD Access.
So SD Access is Campus Fabric plus automation.
And assurance. Yeah, you got it. Okay. I won't read all these off to you, but again, it's kind of a recap of the various different roles, because this gets into like so many things are going on, and like little bits of these are changing and little bits of those are changing. So it's good to just quickly level set. Again, DNA Center is comprised of some kind of identity services, which is through ICE in this case, and then an automation engine and an analytics engine. Inside the fabric, you've got control plane nodes, border nodes, edge nodes, as well as Fabric wireless LAN controllers and Fabric APs.
So border node is the one that does routing with the upstream, and edge node is what connects the clients.
You got it. And then the control plane really just
is the Lisp mapping server.
Mapping system. You got it. All right. And then quick recap of DNA Center. This is just a cute view. It's got, again, the ICE. Built into DNA Center itself is the network control, i.e. automation element, and network data platform, i.e. the assurance element. So it's really broken down into design, provision, policy, and assurance. You guys will see, I've already seen, while I was sitting in the back, some of the other sessions, they're already showing you things. So these would be recurring themes, but this is in the context of Fabric. Okay, so doing all those things in the context of Fabric. Let's just peek at the various, again, workflows is what we like to call them, because there's a lot of different things you can do inside of them, but these are tasks that you have to do, various personas within the company. Design is geared towards your architect, policy towards SecOps, and provision and assurance towards like NetOps. All right, so getting to the point. Yeah, sure.
So if you go back to the previous slide, so in the design phase, you just decide what you want to have.
Nothing has actually happened at
this
stage.
In the policy phase, you are effectively setting common parameters like how is my radius working, yada, 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 yada. And then you're creating objects like virtual networks or endpoint groups. And so this is like sort of ACI-ish.
On purpose. Yeah, sure. Cisco is coming, and you'll also probably hear some bits about SD-WAN. I mean, it's just going to be a common model of abstraction, automation, assurance. So you've already seen some of these common elements in ACI.
And then in provision phase, you are effectively building device configs and pushing device configs to the devices.
Exactly right. And then it's all running, and then I would need to keep track of things in real time.
So you can do design, policy, everything even before the first gear is shipped, yeah? Only with DNA Center.
Exactly right.
So this is like sort of APIC for campus.
Yeah. That's right. They're common on purpose. Okay, so like I said, the real reason they asked me to come in was like, what's new? So many things have happened. So I broke it down into, let's talk about DNA Center itself really quick, because this was not a solid topic the last time we talked. And then really what's happened when we talked about it, we were just launching it. And you guys know how Cisco is. We'll launch something, but it hasn't actually been delivered. So we finally actually delivered it, so 1.0. And then we're already on to 1.1, and we're about to ship 1.2. So many things have happened. So that's kind of how I put it together, like, okay, here's a quick breeze of 1.0, but that's already there, and who cares? Really getting into 1.1, which is where we are right now, and then what are we going to get in a couple of months, okay? Now this is a busy slide on purpose, but it's really the nuts and bolts of it. And I know you guys are tech guys and you want to know what's actually happening. Of course, last time we talked a little bit about the fabric, but I wanted specifically to talk about the infrastructure.
Is there any reason why you ship this as box and not VM?
Absolutely, and it has everything to do with performance. Because if you really get into, we all know this, right? If you give them a VM option, they're going to pare it back to the lowest possible performing option, and then they're going to have performance problems. And then it's really whose fault is it? And they're not going to say it's their fault because they've got the material. It's never their fault. And then you have other, the challenges of dealing with VMware and these kind of things. So in the end, it was like, look, we're going to give you a box. It is a thing. It has all of the parameters and necessary information. In fact, I have a slide on it just after this for exactly that point. So in any case, one of the things that we were originally thinking, this is one of those what's new things, we were just going to do the automation element, and we were going to give the assurance element as separate units, right? And immediately it was to the same point, like, oh my God, now I have to manage multiple systems, and if I do HA, it's multiples of multiples, and we're like, okay. So one of the key things that's changed is that you get the network control platform, again, that's automation, and the network data platform, which is the assurance engine. These are subsystems. All of this within DNA Center itself, right? And then the ICE itself. There you can do VMs in ICE, but even there we recommend an appliance at this level, enterprise level. So again, in a nutshell, we all love block diagrams. That's how the system works. That's the actual PID for anyone that's interested. And that's a single node. It is a monster on purpose, because it goes back to the point. It is a monster, but I'm running all that automation, and if you think on the real beast is the assurance. I've got to do all that data collection. It's sucking in NetFlow, it's sucking in, it's doing all kinds of SNMP and syslog, and then it's storing all this. I don't want to belabor assurance because there's, I guess, a specific Tech Field Day session on assurance, but just to give you an idea. And again, the real point I'm trying to drive home is that it's a single appliance that gives you both of those things, okay? Now, for SD Access 1.0, what we were really trying to just get out the door were the key elements, and it was specifically the automation bit. On the slide, this is DNA Center, right? So they'll use the big high-level marketing terms of just policy and automation and everything that means. But you can see there's kind of like something missing there, right? So we could automate the fabric, and we could, set up those object-based policies and all that good stuff. But if you go to 1.1, one of the main big-ticket items was we finally added the assurance elements, the insights and telemetry. So now it's a full-blown solution. So typically we don't even talk about 1.0. It was just because you guys hadn't seen it since then, okay? But we're at 1.1. All the main elements are in place.
So when you say networking at the speed of software, it's a nice marketing tagline. It really means device provisioning at the speed of software.
Pretty much, yeah. Once you add in the insights, then you start to get a lot of the visibility. You can actually start making, I heard you guys don't like the word context, but you can make contextual changes because I can see what's happening in real time. But that's right. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still configurations that are being pushed through automation, and then, gathering the information, but seeing it all in real time. It's really the fact that all of these tools are together in one place. That's the real value. So the other big ticket item, that is the number one big ticket item of 1.1. The other is a lot of border automation. So before the fabric was really self-contained and you had a lot of manual stuff you had to do on the outside, there is still things you have to do manually on the outside, but in particular, how the SD Access border gets to the outside, we take care of all that stuff for you. So that's really the key pieces I wanted to show you. For assurance, there's a big, like I said, whole session on this, so I'm not going to belabor this point. But specifically elements in assurance just about the fabric. So when they talk about general assurance, they'll talk about the more generic terms, CPU monitoring, interface load, and all those good things. But when you talk about the fabric, obviously it's about the individual client state. I'm looking at the control plane nodes. I'm looking at the edge nodes, and those kind of items. And then, it's an overlay technology, so it's constantly checking for reachability, those kind of things. Now, on the border automation, because that's a general term all by itself, it's really broken into two main categories. One that was only available in SDA 1.0, we could only put the control plane and border on the same node. That's kind of, not so great. It works, and if you have a small environment, that's fine. But what if I have a really big environment or I have lots of borders? Well, I can't make all of them control planes now, can I? So one of the key things, and we knew how to do it, it was just we hadn't built the automation backend.
So it's not the platform or design requirement, it's just that you couldn't...
Into DNA Center.
Yeah, you couldn't generate the right config.
That's right, and have everything tested and all the stuff that's happening on the backside. So that's really what that is that we now actually do automate all the interconnection between all those. And in fact, I'll show you in a second, it's interesting, but it really relies on, again, that context, because now I can actually see all the IP information because the fabric knows what all the borders and control planes are. So that it boils down to a bunch of BGP configs. But I know exactly what the IPs are, so I can cook up this template and push it all, and it works. The other, like I said, is really handing off to the rest of the world, okay? So the first one, this is just a visual. It's self-evident. It means both the control plane and the border are on the same device. That's cool for small environments. Particularly, you don't want to buy an extra box, right? But it really gets down to scale, right? And if this is a small box, that means that's the entire scale of the system. I want to have a dedicated control plane that's a big brain, and then have little borders that go off into various areas.
Same questions before. Can you have the control plane on a VM?
No. Yes, and I'll tell you why. You have to run an iOS device. You can run a CSR. So in that case, yes. Okay. I corrected myself. But it's not like a traditional Windows machine or a Linux machine in that sense. It's an iOS device.
Yeah, no, you need a Lisp map server with extensions.
So this one, as I said, was really about just splitting them apart and then building up an IBGP relationship between the control plane and all the borders. So if just one doesn't seem all that exciting, but imagine if I had a dozen borders. I have to set up all those BGP neighbor relationships and share all that information. And the reason should be obvious, because the border is learning about the endpoints of the fabric from the control plane, and he needs to then advertise that out, and then whatever routes he's learning from the outside, and vice versa. So it's simple, but that's actually a really, really big thing. Like I said, the layer 3. Now what we're doing in 1.1 specifically is a VRF Lite handoff. Very straightforward, means, I'm going to set up a .1Q trunk, or I'm going to do sub-interfaces. It's sub-interfaces. And then run individual processes across those sub-interfaces. And most importantly, because I want to be able to do VRFs. We keep saying segmentation and policy is all built into this, so I then need to be able to give that off to whatever's on the outside. And again, we can do all this stuff before. It was just manual. You had to first configure your fabric, and then you had to telnet into the box, or SSH into the box, and set all that stuff up.
So you had VLANs, virtual networks in the fabric, and then you had to manually configure VRFs and BGP, yeah. Okay.
Exactly. It kind of makes it a little, complicated. It's so simple, except at the border. So that's another big one. On the wireless side, of course, we had wireless integration already. The other thing we've added is over-the-top support. So specifically, I can support your traditional wireless running right over the top. It's CAP-WAP within VXLAN, basically. And then there was a bunch of things just for wireless that were added. So particularly things like wireless SSO support, easier AP onboarding. This is, it will auto-detect the AP and go through the onboarding process. Before, you had to manually do it. That doesn't make it very software-defined in that case, does it? And you guys can read those kind of things. The other interesting one here is the mixed mode. So I can actually have some SSIDs on non-fabric, effectively, non-fabric wireless, and then I can have other SSIDs on fabric.
But this is just a change in the data models you have and the templates you use to generate configs, right?
Correct. Okay. That's exactly right. Now, the big item for 1.2, so I just talked about the handoff. So it's cool. I have this little bubble, and I can connect this bubble to the rest of the network. But what if I have a whole bunch of those bubbles, right? So the big challenge that, and I've personally had this question probably 100,000 times, is, well, I have a lot of networks, and what are you doing for me in the middle? So this entire slide can be boiled down to this thing in the middle. It's the idea of a SDA fabric, right, which means Lisp VXLAN, right, with TrustSec, for a transit area. I hesitate to call it a WAN because it's not a WAN. It's really more of a metro area.
Metro core.
Metro core. But it is its own fabric. And what's really, really important here is it has this transit control plane. And what he's doing, it's a lot like Rahul was talking about. He's the brain of the brains. He's just keeping track of what's going on in the different sites. But he doesn't have any edges of his own, right? He just talks, his edges, in fact, are the borders of the various sites. So each site is in itself.
Or his borders. Is it his edges are the borders of other sites, or his borders are the borders of the other sites?
Same difference. There are no actual edges in the transit area.
I know, but it's not
The border in site 1 to the border in site 2, that's the responsibility of the transit control plane. But in essence, it's
doing VLAN handoff between the two and VRF Lite.
So it's not that. And this is actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because it is in its nature another SD Access campus fabric, right? So we can do a direct border handoff, and it's doing everything that a single fabric is doing in that case. So there's no special, go back to the old way and then try to crank it back together in the new way. It is natively SD Access talking to SD Access talking to SD Access. It's Fabric 1, Fabric 2, Fabric 3.
What's the handoff between them? Is it VXLAN and CAP?
It's still VXLAN and CAP.
You have VXLAN end-to-end.
End-to-end. Exactly right. That's exactly.
Just for me, you need a controller per site?
The control plane, yes. So each one of these is a self-contained fabric. And by the definition of fabric, it means it has to have its own control plane, at least one, and its own border, at least one, and at least one edge. So another thing that we're going to be doing is, a little bit later on, is a fabric in a box. So effectively running all those roles on a single device. But yes, to answer the question directly, and if you think about it, it is about scale. It's very similar to what Rahul was describing, right? That you want this area to keep track of his endpoints and his routes and his policies and so forth. But someday I'm going to need to get over to that other site, right? So just the relationship of where those endpoints are registered, so that control plane can talk to that control plane.
And just one question. If you have the transit area configured, yeah, you just configure that transit area controller that pushes down everything to the sites, or do you still need to configure the sites individually?
You need to configure the sites individually, and then as an extra step, you configure the transit area. It'd be like, setting up a SD-WAN. So one of the other things we'll also support is handing off to an SD-WAN or a traditional IP-based WAN in the old way, right? But it's the same thing. I have to separately, independently manage the WAN, right, the transit area, and then each site is managed. But again, it's all within DNA Center. So I have the information available to me in the site hierarchy. So I know all about site 1 and site 2. They've been configured, and then I set up a transit area that communicates with them.
You manage all 3 sites and the transit from the same orchestration system. It's not federation.
Correct. Exactly right. And it's all SD Access fabric. So that's the big value behind it, and all the marketing stuff. It's a marketing slide. I have detailed slides, but I was told same thing, keep your slides short. So I just went with the easiest one-slide example.
And you are stretching a single VLAN across multiple sites, I see.
That's one of the benefits, yeah. So
Is it a benefit?
Well, no. So this gets into the fact that it's not actually a stretched VLAN, right? Yeah.
It's VXLAN in gap.
But only the VLANs are only locally significant, yeah? I can overlapping and everything is no problem for you.
Yeah, That's right. Another interesting item coming in 1.2 is, I don't like the name. I can think of a cooler name for it, but it's extension or an extended node. Means he's not himself natively running the fabric, but because I have the full automation engine, I can automate all the stitching of those devices, and it's specifically targeted for like compact switches and the industrial Ethernet switches. So in that way, I can extend the fabric. So the fabric edge is still, Cat 9K, something like that, and then have these compact switches below them, and we will automate all of that for you.
So does that mean that just that you're supporting VLAN trunking on the edge ports, or is there more behind that on the extended node?
That is exactly what it is. Okay. Yeah. And again, it's the automation element of it, but at the end of the day, that's what it is at a technical level, is that we're mapping the correct VLAN to the IP pool and so forth. That's right.
But from an orchestration standpoint, this is seamless then, yeah? Configure it, yeah.
Exactly right. Again, it's all within one workflow,
Oh, so does that mean that you're also managing the extended node from DNA Center?
Correct.
Including automation?
Correct. And the assurance. Absolutely.
You didn't say intent. I'm surprised. You didn't say intent.
Not yet, yeah.
Getting there, don't worry.
Yeah. I'm going to save that for the assurance guys. That's right. That's all DNA Center stuff. I'm just teaching you about the fabric. I'll leave that for somebody else. So this in itself was kind of a recap slide, but it's, for anybody listening, anybody watching, it really in the meantime, a lot of people are like, oh my God, are you asking me to swallow this whole pill? No, for one, it's a fabric overlay, meaning I can run over the top of your existing network, just drop in a couple of switches. So really what you should be concentrating on is getting SD access capable hardware and software. And again, because it's an overlay, I can just get a couple of new switches, leave your network exactly like it is, and just run right over the top of your existing network. You do need to get that DNA Center appliance that we talked about, and that has the automation and assurance built into it. And then, we always encourage people to look into services.
What you've shown us is pretty useful, but it works only with Campus Fabric, right?
Correct.
Okay. Sorry to hear that, but I understand yours.
What would you propose as an alternative?
No, it would be nice to have something like this, also being able to automate the older stuff, or if I prefer to have non-Campus Fabric approach to my network design, because whatever, I don't like Lisp, or whatever reason. But I would still like to have the automation elements and all that.
So there is basic automation when you talk to the automation guys in the traditional fashion, right? If you just want to set up those elements.
Well, I'm not talking about netconf server on the box. I'm talking about something in the middle that has the data models and the policy model.
As far as like configuration templates and being able to do configuration automation, we do that. But you're not going to get, for all the normal reasons, you're not going to get the end-to-end policy and the wireless integration. But yes, those elements are also included in DNA Center. Absolutely. So, bunch of links. Go check them out. It's pretty easy. I promised I would show you some of this stuff. So let me jump over to another window. So the first one, and hopefully it hasn't timed me out in the meantime. Yeah, and this is like connecting all the way back to San Jose. So it's a testament to wireless and the speed of the internet. But in any case, there's a bazillion things I could show you. I'm not going to trouble you with that. The only thing I'll point out is that the assurance is present in 1.1. I actually want to take you deeper into provisioning because this is really where the magic of the fabric happens. And again, it's really just to demonstrate the points that I made, right? We've all been able to do this for a while. But what's new is that border handoff stuff, okay? So you drill down into a given fabric. You're presented with all your various network equipment. Let me collapse this part of it so it's a little easier to see. So, and I can keep adding edge nodes. There's a wireless LAN controller integrated. It's all magic. What I really wanted to show you was before, all you could do was this CP and border. So that was the combined mode, and that's all you could do. In fact, that's how the other node right now is set up. But say, okay, I'm going to keep adding borders. I have a border that goes to the data center. I got a border that's going over to my firewall. I got another different border for my WAN. So as simple as add a border, and what it's doing under the covers, because I know the IP addresses and all the information from this, I'm building BGP sessions underneath. Then you have a couple different options to set up there. Now, as far as the handoff, so this is why they, for one, make you do the local autonomous system number because of that internal BGP session that we're setting up. So it knows, hey, we're all in 65001, ergo we're iBGP neighbors. And then for handoff, we are going to support, one thing I didn't talk about was a layer 2 handoff as well, because there's always that customer that really needs their layer 2 handoff. But the focus really is on layer 3. As I said, it was VRF Lite. It's all fully integrated with the IP address management. So obviously you have to give some IPs. You're telling the automation system, these are the IPs I want you to talk to the outside world with. So this is what's going to connect to your neighbor.
Using your own internal IPAM, or can you integrate with something external?
Both. So you can, obviously cook something up. We manage all of that ourselves within DNA Center, but then through the APIs, we can also import from Infoblox and BlueCat.
So that's already available.
That's already available, yep. So you pick that pool. Like I said, that's what's going to be automated on the interfaces talking to your outside neighbor. And then you go and pick one or more interfaces. And you give him his autonomous system number on the other side. The other interesting thing is I can selectively choose which virtual networks, VRFs, that I want to advertise to the outside world. So it is a multi-protocol BGP session. Or you can just select all and do that. Now, the other piece I wanted to show you, and that's pretty straightforward, is a early proof of concept. So I got to set the stage and the expectation. It's proof of concept because 1.2 is not coming. But it is a working proof of concept. So like we talked about, right, the key value, the major change for 1.2 is that multi-site element. And you asked the question about, are you setting up the individual sites and the individual elements? So down here, and this is what's different, I think you saw when I went into the fabrics in 1.1, it was just the fabrics, and they really mean a bunch of campus or LAN fabrics, right? So now I have the individual fabrics as well as I have transit fabrics, and they're the same thing. It just, you're logically separating the two of them, right? And the other element that's sort of baked in here, which was not actually in 1.1, is a direct relationship with its site. So in the design element, you go in and you set up your site hierarchy. That was more indirect in the way we were doing it before. I would take the equipment and I would assign it to a site, but you didn't really know when you were inside of creating the fabric what site you were in anymore. And you just, smartly named the fabric the same as the site and you knew you were in the right place. But now it's directly baked in. So that direct element from design, it's part of the same hierarchy. You can group multiple sites together and that sort of thing. So let me, this is like the in state. It actually didn't get cleared up. But in any case, let me go through here. And then go into here. So Just like I did the border automation, so the border automation would have already happened. The border is the border, right? I've created the site. It's back to your question. I would have already set the site up 6 months ago. I need to now connect these sites together. So I'm gonna go in there, I'll edit it, and you know, it seems super simple, but what's happening under the covers is rewriting all of the handoff statements, so all the VERFs are being mapped out. I'm mapping the different control planes together. You know, I'm writing all the different policies and those kind of things. But it's so simple as, okay, I'm going to select the transit that I want, and
out of curiosity, do you see the configs before they're pushed out to verify them, or is it all magic?
it's all magic. I have advocated for some time to add that element. And certainly the part we talked about, which was the just general, what we call basic automation, you can see those in the templates before you actually automate them. You can see it after the fact, and there are a series of verification checks. Like I didn't really make a point of it, but there is a verification element before you actually push the configs. But after it has actually happened, you can then return to the device inventory, and you can actually see the real config. Because of course all of this is in the database. We know what the system actually looks like. But as of right now, it doesn't directly show you like, hey, I'm going to configure all these things. And in fact, it's sort of the opposite approach. We as tech people really love that sort of stuff. But you know, if you're a college grad that has never heard of Lisp or VXLAN, you would have no idea what you were looking at, right? So with the, you know, there's an argument for both directions on this one, as it is.
Just your verification. If a config that I would try to push would, for example, result in a loss of connectivity to that site, yeah, it will warn you and say no.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We are aware of all the individual elements because it's all modularized. Like, you know, this is the snippet of code that configures this piece of Lisp, and this snippet configures the VXLAN. So we run all those checks, and it'll warn you before if it is an invalid or conflicting config. Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You know, visualization. And it isn't being like that. So now it's just like zoomed out levels. So you can see that entire, and this is again to your point, there is the full fabric in San Jose, which is a different fabric that's in San Francisco. But I very easily automate the handoff of this transit fabric between San Jose and San Francisco.